What's a meme?
Dorian, can I answer that with a very lazy Deleuzean style buggery of the authors?
Yes.
Just to take this pair from behind, and we need to abjure pairs because that's a binary. But I find myself in like my academic practice constantly just reworking these people, in the way that they would rework someone like, something like Tropic of Capricorn. So I'm just going to replace a single word with meme, and I'm going to tell you what memes are. And it's also, this is a way so I didn't have to prepare. I just can very lazily read from this text. So this is from, the Deleuze and Dragons Necronomicon version of ATP. And we say, it's a long one, so I'm just going to take everyone's time here, more than this rambling introduction. The rhizome is altogether different. A meme, not a tracing. Make a meme, not a tracing. The orchid does not reproduce the tracing of the wasp. It forms a meme with the wasp in a rhizome. What distinguishes the meme from a tracing is it is entirely oriented towards an experimentation in contact with the real. And I think that really sums up a meme, at least I think in the way that I would say that Bjorn Woke and Dorian and myself are interacting with them, rather than just say, standard forms, even though we do use that, because I think there's something where it says the meme does not reproduce an unconscious closed upon itself. It constructs the unconscious. And so I think Dorian and maybe Bjorn Woke are probably more familiar with Lacan than me, but it strikes me there's also something deeply anti-psychoanalytic in the meme. So in psychoanalysis, we might say something along the lines of, the subconscious is structured like a language because, it's always about interpreting signifiers in some sense, which we're going to get to maybe why, of course, we have to, and it's nice to, but it's polite to, and it's not necessary for the way that we construct anything, especially subjectivity. So I might say the meme is fundamentally going to be this asignifying yet structuring of the unconscious. And in this sense, we might say, sorry, I'll slow down. It's this, it is always appealing to libido. And I think the point of desire is to say, not what is it, but rather, what does it want? What is it doing? And so this is all together to do with, I forget which of the three chapters it's in, but they say something about, it might come at the end of the Rhizome chapter, where they say something along the lines, the point is to overthrow ontology, overthrow what there is. This doesn't say we now ignore metaphysics. And it seems to me, we have a libidinal ontology, but we overthrow this regime of signification. And I think a meme fundamentally is doing this constantly by the way that it, it doesn't trace the real. It has these maps and lines, that form rhizomatically. So I think I'll leave it there, because I've said in the chat when we were organizing this, I could talk about any 2 to 3 pages of this for 3 hours on its own. And then I realized, no, I could talk about any sort of like clause structure for 2 to 3 hours. It's just a highly memeable text, and that's hugely problematic for brevity. So yeah, throw it over to someone. I'll get out of here.
We only have 6 hours to ramble incoherently. So, I mean, what are we going to do? How are we going to fit it all in? Yeah, I mean, one of the things that ends up popping into my mind as you talk about that is a question that I often see about specific memes, people asking, where did this come from, right? Which is always the wrong question, because it ends up implying, or not implying, it drags in the real problem with ontology, which is that it's historical, which is why we want to maintain a metaphysics without kind of holding on to this kind of Hegelian ontology where, A plus B equals C kind of thing. Again, the issue with psychoanalysis and Lacan for something like memes, right? It's the quote that I have in my Instagram bio. It kind of communicates a big portion of this, simply being the idea that memeing has nothing to do with meaning or signification. It's about map making. It's about kind of guessing and creating and producing new territories. And so when we end up getting a question about like, where the hell did the dat boy frog come from? that and no one knows as far as I'm aware. That's always asking the wrong question, because it shouldn't have to do with that historical contextualization, because a meme is always looking towards the future, right? Which is that's the important thing about the body without organs, which we might do well to try to define to some degree. But the body without organs is just, it's the production of this kind of zero space, or this pure intensities. It's this masochistic space that produces nothing but pure potentialities and new ways of moving through the world, right? And so all memes are constantly trying to fit into that space of reproducing new non-same versions of themselves, right? And so memes are always futurative and never historical. So which is a really bizarre way of looking at it, especially if we want to bring in some spooky retro causality stuff. Last little thing, just a little note on there. Really bad news, everyone. Nick Land, I've heard, has touched grass. And that seems like a very, very dark thing for all of us going forward. I'm not sure what it means, but we'll figure it out.
It's better than touching water, because we were all speculating that he was like flooded in the floods.
Is it diving down to Atlantis? We're gonna be a whole
right. The mirror,
So yeah, what is a Wojak without organs then? I'm just going to ask questions intermittently and then hope that someone else can answer them so that I can pretend I know what I'm talking about.
By the way, I'm glad Memes of Saturn is here. He's really taken like the Wojak concept, like to very far, and doing good things with it.
Thanks. I feel like I don't know, the Wojak kind of like distills all these ideas in a very unique way, because when I first started using Wojaks, I would like do whatever the most basic, thing I could find on Google Images was. And then like moving forward, it turned into like I'm going to like take a piece from this and take a piece from that and, bring it together in a truly rhizomatic way. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what a Wojak without organs is, but I feel like the idea of a Wojak, doesn't have any organs to begin with.
So it's true. Yeah, I haven't seen any Wojak organs around. Sorry, what was that, Luke?
No, just on this idea of the without organs here is interesting, just because of the way that so the concept of without organs is quite mobile across anti-Oedipus, Thousand Plateaus, difference and repetition. And the work I find the easiest to engage with about it is Deleuze's book on Francis Bacon, which I sort of think describes not a progression of it, but the multiplicity of this concept of the withoutness of the organs. So, because we might say, we could say it is the full disintegration and disorganization, which could be when they talk about the different kinds of bodies. So it's this completely unaffective body. It's the absolute limit. It no longer creates. And to them, I think it's both dangerous and useless. I feel like it's the it's the war machine out of gas or something. But then there's also these other things that you might say the body without organs could be. This comes up that it is imperceptible. So we say, I can't tell where the anus is here. Like there's an anus, but it's not organized in this particular way. So the body is still functioning. There's clearly an organ, but we're not going to be able to attach these kind of significations to it on an axiomatic level. We're going to have to approach this, according to the principle of the rhizome, which I think I think it is explicitly stated at points, but rhizomatics is fundamentally, what a filthy word, fundamentally a pragmatics. So you say, what is shitting? This creature, this body shits. But then there's also this, the without can also be, I think, the mobile functionality of the organ, which I think is easy to sort of get your head around. You say, this body isn't organized, but it has a series of mobile organs. And this might also be like, say, the black holes moving across, across any kind of white signifying space. You say, at one moment, it eats, at one moment it shits, at one moment it fucks. It's always working. Now this is the mobile organ, which I think is still in their terminology without organs, because it is, it's a function for the body. It's not predicated on sort of an axiom of, we need these, like, it's sort of like a civilizing effect or something. Like it's a heuristic for sort of, falling into line, to falling into signification. And I think the Wojak, certainly in the way that Saturn has used it, has that, all those sort of mobile components, because, you can use, any like there's a standardized Wojak face, and the way that you attach this, whether it's to a white wall or a sort of, an approximation of fuchsia or something, you're going to see this organ functioning in its mobility, which, this is going to come up all through the text, but this is that the nomadicism of the organ. So we're not, I don't think the Wojak or the meme, as it replicates itself always as difference, is ever going to be hostile to, I feel like such a jerk talking about memes like this, but it's never going to, it's never going to be without organs. It's going to be without the organization or principles of these, so we'll go, I get this in the moment, but it's not part of some like big structure where, I didn't have to, like, to try and learn to read memes is, I think, in some sense always going to be a project where you reject sort of the intensities of memes. Yeah,
I think I'm sure everyone here has read Deleuze and did the homework, and absolutely no one skipped out on the reading. But I think maybe something that would be useful here would be, as we go to clarify what a couple of these key words and concepts are. And I think when we're talking, you brought up two really important things that I think we should go over. But one of them being, the body without organs isn't necessarily a space that it's not eviscerated, right? It's just disorganized. Where the organs are still present, it's not a body without organs as in removed, but the organs have now kind of become new bizarre relationships to one another, and they're functioning in like a gerund way, can no longer be made into a gerund, right? So instead of eating, shitting, and fucking, right, you end up, you do eat or shit or fuck in the moment, right? Instead of these becoming like actual fundamental nouns, which become the identity of the organ, right? It's the, like you bring up the anus, and the anus, depending on context, can have all sorts of different uses, I'm afraid to tell you. And not the least of which is, of course, defecating, but you could also talk out of it, like I'm doing right now. But you see, that's the body without organs kind of concept, is that these organs still continue to exist, but then they redefine themselves or make themselves available for redefinition. And I'd be curious to see if Luke or Beyond would have like ways to remedy or kind of re-clarify what I just said. But the additional point is this faciality thing, right? Now, in this essay, they talk about, the year zero. The reason it's called year zero faciality is because we're ultimately talking about the standard face for human beings is the face of Christ, right? That's the formation that we then end up judging everyone else by, or placing them in proximity to, in order to define them, which ends up leading to all sorts of I think discrimination is a great word for it in a variety of ways, right? Because discrimination is predicated upon like a delineation, but it also has that problem of being like, non-me is necessarily problematic. But this faciality, we find ourselves in a really bizarre place when it comes to the Wojak, because everything finds itself in this facial proximity to the Wojak, which is why we have things like the soy jack or whatever other various forms of this. And so we have this, the Wojak is bigger than Jesus, is what I'm saying. Or it is Jesus. I'm not sure what I'm saying. Could someone clarify that for me?
Yeah. So now I can't help but I'm just going to riff the whole time because of the texts we're talking about. I haven't given this any real pre-thought, but when we're talking about Jesus here in some sense, well, in explicit terms, we say, at some point in this text, in this essay, they bring up this idea that the face is always already the inhuman in the human. And so we say, well, so here we have a few interesting things. So we say, well, Jesus, if we think of, the terms of maybe the Trinity, is he of the substance of God? Is he like the substance of God? Is he God? These things, all of these things in some sense are already other than human. So the face is always the approach of, or the heralding of God. So when we talk about Wojak, and maybe we talk about Wojak as the madman running through town at midday with a lantern, screaming, God is dead and we have killed him. And here then we can sort of, we don't have to be afraid of the inhumanity of the face, because in some sense, like I would say, the kind of asignification, yet still like asignifying, yet still effective and powerful and developing and active things like, say, the Wojak, I think it starts to slide into this space that maybe, Nietzsche, like a pessimistic Nietzsche, which I don't think really is a thing, but a pessimistic Nietzsche might say, we aren't yet ready to slide into the inhuman, which also we always already were. So, when we approach as, the face of God or the face of Wojak, we begin to make these inroads into disorganizing the human. And so I think it's like one of the clearest things they say in this chapter is, the face has a great future if only we destroy it. So this is, I really like this for the Wojak, because it, in some sense, is, it is destroying the face. There is nothing real about it, but it has all of the sort of, that D&G talk about, the white plains, the matte colors, the highlights of the moon. Well, the Wojak has this, and I know that it's I know it's fundamentally a position of irony, and I think irony is often seen as, sort of a de-libidinizing element. Like we get distance, we won't approach this. But then I see in sort of the meme communities that we operate in, there are highly libidinal Wojaks, because they prompt this kind of community. Maybe we're irony poisoned. But then I would also, two more things. Sorry. So maybe we're irony poison, but then we could say, well, if you think about Derrida and he's talking about, Platon's pharmacy, we say, well, we needed to kill Socrates to save Athens. We killed Socrates with poison. But the point here is that, I guess, but we're going much further than this, because the poison here is to destroy the world. The world here is the human world, the signifying world. And so I think that my long time to get to this punchline, the Wojak is what is playing us reaching level 2, if we're all read up on at least the back cover of Fang Numina. So I said, we know it's moving away from a like being a requirement of participation in community to signify, and instead operate at an affective level that allows these sort of freewheeling exchanges that aren't about, I would say, like creating strata that aren't acting between one another, but instead are, which I think just a normal person would say it, they're not creating hierarchies of domination. But I would say we're creating, they create stratas where what is real isn't like the meaning of the term. It is the dynamic flow in between these layers of strata. So this is massively abstract, and I said I would just riff, and I hope that gets somewhere for some people. But yeah, I think that the Wojak is destroying the human on its own terms, which is to say, exposing the inhumanity of the face. And I really haven't let Woke Beyond say shit. So I can't help myself.
That's right. You guys are way more qualified, honestly, than I am. But just to add to that, I think the shroom jack is like, I don't know, there's something there with and also the salmon and the bear and all those other. I think that's is like level 2 post human Wojak, or at least the direction we could head. But anyway, please.
I'm really sorry, guys. I have to confess something. I've been making memes on my phone this whole time for the last like 5 minutes. So if you've seen me looking off the screen, that's what I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, something that's maybe worth diving deeper into that you were talking about there is this this concept of stratum and the way that it interacts with something like the body without organs, or this other nasty term that I'm shocked hasn't come up yet here, but deterritorialization, right? And how the body without organs, again, isn't necessarily, I'll kind of repeat some of what I said in a different way, I guess. It's not necessarily about an evisceration, and it's not necessarily about the erasure of stratum, right? Instead, it is about the exploration, movement, and hopping through stratum, right? It's to make it available, that kind of a space. And so when we're talking about the Wojak destroying the human face, I think that that's really fantastic, because it, by destroying it, extends it, right? It's because any kind of deterritorialization inherently either makes for a space which will become quickly re-territorialized by something else, or becomes an extension of the previous territory which has been deterritorialized, right? It's deterritorialization, the disorganization, anything like that, is always the extension of the previous, even if it is in an attempt to erase or ambiguate it. And yeah, yes, destroying the human face extends the human face. I'm sticking with that. God bless the singularity.
I like that take, actually. That's very interesting.
Thank you, Aiden.
I will be thinking on that, my guy.
I'm going to learn how to upload a meme to Miro while someone else talks.
Any thoughts on the Giga Chad? I was curious myself. I don't.
Yeah, Giga Chad might be. So that brings up an interesting question: is like, how do we define this Christ figure, right? Because the Christ figure is in this weird way both the model by which everything is made in comparison, but also ends up becoming, in some other models, like transcendent. And so the Giga Chad is Christ-like in the opposite sense from how the Wojak is. The Wojak is like Christ in the sense that it's this central point by which everything is compared and kind of valued or defined. But then the Giga Chad is this sense of a thing which could be perfect, which has all sorts of different distinctions and organizations being kind of projected onto it, right? The Ubermensch, right. Thank you, Duster. And so really interesting, yeah, opposite ends which meet in the middle there. Yes, Giga Chad.
So what I'm getting from this is Jesus is a sigma. Is that the consensus?
He's absolutely a sigma. He started his own club, you know? Yeah, yes, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Pontius Pilate Alpha, Judas Beta, Christ.
No. Judas is at least an alpha. Peter was a beta. Peter is a beta.
Thomas is also a beta. I think we can agree on Thomas.
But Gospel of Thomas, though. It's be slapped.
You know, a sigma and an alpha, never going to doubt things, never going to doubt themselves, never going to doubt Christ. Who's the omega here? Actually, there was another interesting question that Laura ended up asking previously, and it was just for a clarification about a a concept that that Luke brought up, the war machine without gas. Do you feel comfortable expanding on that?
Yeah, so I can try, and so this is something that it's something that I'm going to work out in the moment, but it's moving towards something along the lines of, when I think of the body without organs, if I think of it in all of its sort of multiple instantiations, none of them have primacy. It doesn't matter where the concept comes from. What I would tend to sort of, how I would use it, because I don't want to tell you what it is, but how I would use it would be to say the BWO is always, it's the limit and the beginning. So, it has this alpha and omega thing without the duality of alpha and omega. It's impossible to desire without disorganization. It strikes me, it's impossible to desire without organization, but there's always something to desire. So this is this generative thing. Now, the war machine is always moving. It's always moving against. Now, I think that against doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to have a target, and it's not always going to be doing things. I would think that, that even the users of it, the creators of it, desire. But so I think the war machine is in some sense a type of BWO, and it's the mobile one. Like, I don't know if it's doing drone strikes or rebuilding a community or teaching strange lectures on an internet forum that reminds me of the early 2000s for some reason. So it could be doing any of these things, but then the gasless quality of it here would be to say this is actually much more boring than the term sounds, but it is that flat and dead, eviscerated BWO that I think in some sense you see in maybe the psychoanalytic interpretation of what organs may be. So, I'm until you can restore my anus and my stomach, I can't possibly act in the world. And so this is the war machine without gas is always going to be worried about its organizations, while not understanding that it never, like, it always already had a total disorganization. So it no longer has any affect. It has no, like, it has this sort of strange, like, striving to, but the striving to is always just going to be along this, like, sort of flat vector. And so I think this is in some sense, it's when D&G talk about the BWO, it may be along the lines of, say, of drugs or schizophrenia. Like, in a clinical sense, you might say, well, it's the BWO that's arrived at catatonia, and which is maybe something we might say it's even worse than, say, because the BWO as a sort of as the end and beginning of desire, we can desire terrible things. I think, like Guattari writing about, microfascisms, the desire that, you do what I want, or I do what I, having these second order moral imperatives that we've absorbed or that we've theorized, because I guess everyone who's here probably has given some thought to what they should do. Now, maybe that's a fascism, like, according to Guattari. But yeah, so I just think, yeah, so the war machine without gas is the zone of flat affect that still acts like it's striving, yet you can never break that. So I should have just said that to begin with. It's the zone of flat affect that still strives, which is, which I think this is something that I think Frederick Jameson sort of and Zizek, I think, kind of like point out as maybe a flaw in Deleuze, which I don't really buy. That it's, this focus on libidinal economy as a matter of first principle of organization, but then straight away saying, now let's disorganize it. They say, well, this leads to this either leads to fascism, or it leads to a dualism of action and inaction. And I feel like I haven't really drawn it out here, but I don't think, the war machine without gas isn't a vector of inaction or action. It's an action, but it's a flat action that's ineffective. Like, it's not good at anything. And by good, I just mean, works well towards a pragmatics. Yeah, so hopefully that, like, clears it, because I'm kind of just riffing on that. But yeah, so I'll stop it there. And so I feel like an absolute like just fuck with doing this, because I'm just talking about like just little jokes that I have that I want to turn into memes and going, yes, now let's do it for 3 hours. I'll do it. Like, I love it. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so the war machine without organs is or without organs. Jesus, I just did a whole thing there. The war machine without gas is it's just a LARPer, right? It's it lacks affect and effect. It's again a weird kind of meeting in the middle thing. Also, I've uploaded the first meme. I did it. I figured it out. You can just drag into the Miro board, guys. You can just drag it in. It's magic. What's up, Luke?
I just want to say, like, when you say it's LARPing, no, this, we can bring this right back to Wojak's. We say, you know, it's the NPC. So the war machine without gas is the NPC. You know, it's
okay. Yeah. That is better than yeah. Sorry.
No, well, sorry. Like super invested in role playing games. There's a difference between there's something like deeply it strikes me embarrassing about LARPing. But it's full of libido. The NPC, you know, whether, you know, if you're a good GM in a tabletop game, hopefully, you know, your NPCs don't come across like this. But I'm just thinking, say, you know, the cast of extras, whether it's in Skyrim or something like that. Not like I would say, like, you know, NPCs in a game like Disco Elysium are full of libidinal energies, whereas, you know, you go into, you know, I'm just thinking of like Bethesda games. This is probably just for me, and I think no, I think Tom O'Bedlam might get this.
People won't admit it, but I think way more people are understanding and picking up what you're talking about.
Okay, yeah. No, so I'll leave that distinction there.
Yes, that's making me think about. Yeah, so a war machine without gas makes its movement because it's on like rails, right? It's defined by the territory that it's in, right? The territory is what moves it, rather than it moving through stratum or territories itself. Yeah. No, there's something there that I'm not ready to open up.
So when you bring up how the war machine without gas is like on rails, I'm seeing that reflected in like Bethesda games with like railroading of plot.
Right.
I think that might just be me, but I don't know. That's my connection.
No, yeah. When I said on rails, I was thinking about like in Oblivion. Let's just do it, guys. Let's admit that we've all played Skyrim, right? But
it's a good fucking game.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's a deeply broken game, and we've all played it. But there's this you see these characters that pretend to live out their lives because they're programmed to, but all they do is they live on this continuous loop where they go home and then they go to the restaurant and pretend to eat, and then they wander the street and then they go home. And that is the rails that I'm kind of thinking about there. And I think that's an interesting way to drag like Lacan back into this, and language and signification, right? In the sense that the issue with both Lacan and Hegel, and Lacan is just a Hegelian Freud, right? Is that the context of a thing, along with its, again, historical ontology, is the thing that defines the body, the organs, the actions of the body and those organs, the gerunds, which become themselves stable things, the verbs that become nouns, right? The becoming that becomes being. And all of this is stuck on this track, always predicated by that which occurred previous and that which occurs simultaneously and has some kind of defining affect for it, right? Whereas the idea of the body without organs is that it is you can't get rid of those things, right? You can't get rid of context. Context exists, but the way in which context matters can change. The way that context interacts can change. The way that history interacts can change. No one who's, I shouldn't say that. most people who are like the quasi-Deleuzean or whatever are not going to say that you can literally erase history and, you know, hierarchy and all of these things, at least not with immediacy, but you can absolutely change what they end up meaning, at least in some small way. And the smallest change in a rhizomatic structure, because everything is at least potentially connected to everything, and everything kind of, the smaller portions reflect the larger, and the larger the smaller. If every single little recontextualization that you make, and every single bit of movement you make from one stratum to another, ends up redefining everything around you, right? It has an exponential effect. Yeah, so my memes are very important, guys. Okay, stop making fun of me. I'm very important. I'm very smart.
My Instagram post, please.
Please like and subscribe.
This is so sad. Can we get 50 likes?
I cry every time. Yeah. So that was supposed to be inspirational. If anyone is feeling like you know, like going out there and changing the world now, a little electoralism or something.
I can feel my eyes roll into the back of my skull.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
I do want to bring everyone's. I mean, I already kind of like, you know, tried to sneak everyone's eyes over to it. But the first meme, you know, I think that I posted. Sorry, and you know, it's the monad Wojak. You know, and I think that that's a really good way of summarizing everything that we've kind of, or much of what we've said so far, right? Which is, if we want to connect all of this to memes and the making of memes, because I think a big part of why at least some people came in here is because they want to like make memes, and they want to hear a little bit about meme making instead of just the theory around it. I'm sure one is going to be boring to some people and the other is going to be boring to the rest. But this creation of memes, the way that I end up making them at least, is that every dumb joke that I end up putting up, unless it's just extraordinarily dumb, is just me collating and kind of processing a series of other thoughts, right? And so something like this monad Wojak is my attempt to distill all this other shit that we just said over the last 50 minutes inside of a little image, right? It's a way of thinking through things in a different format. And I think, I'm curious if like Luke and beyond have a similar process, similar intention to me making there. Same for Tom of Bedlam. Yeah. What do you think? Why do you mean?
Honestly, I feel like most of the time, whenever I make like specifically theory-centric memes, what I'll be doing is I'll like actually like set aside some time to read theory, and I'll sit down and I'll be reading like Bataille or something, and I'll see something and it just captures my attention so intently that it's the only thing I think about for like 3 hours, just this one little piece of text. And then my brain is like, how can we visualize this for other people and also make it kind of funny? So that's usually the process I have, but that doesn't happen very often anymore.
No, that's great.
Yeah, I can that I've done that too. I don't know. That's ideally how I do it. I see something, and instead of like making a note or a diagram, I'll just make a meme of it. But I don't know. Every day it's harder to just constantly read theory every day and come up with like new content. So it, eventually becomes a reversion to the algorithm. But I mean, that in itself is also like a process, and yeah.
I'm loving everyone's comments in the chat. I'm sorry, what was that, Luke?
So I have this like my meaning comes from my I think my impatience with the texts, and and I think this is something that's increased. Maybe it's just the time when I started reading theory, also a point when my use of, say social media escalated. I become more impatient with difficult texts, also maybe more terrified of them. And so, because, my formal studies, there's no Deleuze seminar, there's no theory seminars in any of the, I've been at uni for a long time. And there's no, I've never encountered Deleuze or theory inside, whether I've, it's English literature or philosophy units that I've taken. And so I'm impatient I'm impatient to get to, originally I was impatient to get to know. And then by this point, I'm terrified that I don't understand. And so, but at this point, it's just embracing the fact that this is my understanding of it. This will sort of solidify what I can do with it. I tried to just upload something like a meme to Miro. I don't know where on the board it went, but I think it just shows, there's something deeply non-mimetic, I think, about, I think what I'm doing now, in the sense that I will just go, oh, here is an image, but I usually start with the text. So I think, and often I'll just slap the text or a bastardization of the text over an image. As even that, I think, but now I get it. So what I try to put up, and I can't see it anywhere, it's just a series of faces. This is for faciality, series of faces transforming, I guess, from a human into a Lovecraftian deep one, then put a quote from Henry Miller's Tropic of Capricorn over it. And then because in my work, I'm reworking Tropic of Capricorn to make it Lovecraftian, to prove a point about D&G, so that my thesis supervisor will think that I'm, doing my work and I should keep getting my stipend, blah, blah, blah. It's all it's pragmatic. It's a pragmatics, but in a very serious sense, it's that I know that I don't have a handle on this material, but it's massively exciting. And if I could just, show that to other people, I'll have, it's going to extend my powers to it'll extend my powers to intensify here. So I think this is something really important in my memeing process, is that, the interplay of extension and intensity here. So, and taking intensity both as, say, the increase of, whether valence, whether it's, however that might be valenced, increased valence, but also the bringing into tension, that intention, and also the intentionality. So my explicit desire, the tensions that I create there, and the way that I see them sort of break apart. And this comes back to, when D&G say, the fragmentary text still has a unity, and that's not a multiplicity yet. How do we get there? Well, we do it by destroying the roots. I feel that I could have just said this start, actually. So the roots, the meme, I think, in some sense, always destroys the roots. So I can move past the fragmented text, even if it's D&G or if it's Lovecraft or Burroughs, who I think is explicitly sort of, both called out and championed by D&G. If he fragments the text, the soft machine is still the soft machine, whatever he's done to it, but it's beginning to point to a way forward. I think the meme is doing fundamentally that. And I have this very pragmatic sense that I'm moving towards something massively disorganized yet powerful. And I can only do that by participating in this community. And it's, so this is, I think there's this, I'm always, when thinking about memes, I always think of Borges's Pierre Menard, the author of Don Quixote. So sort of we write the exact same text, yet it's massively different in its powers. And this is what I'm trying to do, say Dorian or Beyond Woke or Tom or Saturn, they all read theory. We could read the same clause structure in Deleuze, and what massively strange powers and different powers come out of each of those. And it's not because we're wrong or it's meaningful, or it's because it's effective and effective, hopefully. So blah, blah, blah.
Looks like Kaya has a question. Kaya, if you want to come up and share.
Yes.
I just want to remind everybody participating, you can do screen share to share your work okay, go for it.
Okay, so on the topic of memes, I agree with what others said, but I want to get others into like Guattari and Deleuze with memes. That's how I found out about like anti-Oedipus, because I started seeing like memes about body without organs, rhizomes, and they had like Wojaks in them and some weird visual effects, and I was intrigued. And I started reading the book. Same with Guattari. Like I was doing random memes with eye emojis, and my friend told me to read the story of the eye, and now I'm very interested in Guattari, and I try to get others to read him with memes.
I love it. Meme literacy.
Yeah, love to hear it.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people in my my personal life before starting into memeing, who I would try to talk about theory, and their eyes would glaze over, and you would see part of them die, and it was just they would do anything to get out of another fucking conversation about like what limit experience is, which is funny because that's I don't know, man. I love this stuff so much. And what's boring about limit experience? Anyway, but then all I had to do was make a joke about how the sun's a butthole. And then suddenly everyone's just like, oh yeah, that's fascinating. I would love to learn about this. And so I do think, like, not to over glorify like our role or anything, we are just idiots on the internet, but there is something that is like valuable, both for me personally and potentially, you know, politically or socially or otherwise, in building something like this, because in the end, like, though memes aren't necessarily important, theory sure as shit is, right? And so by putting out these little bites for people to kind of go for, by putting out debate and then getting someone to read Bataille or read Deleuze or anything like that, I think that that's worthwhile. And so I'm curious about, because this is kind of connected to what Luke was saying, but a lot of what I end up representing is, you know, me thinking through a concept rather than me saying, I know this thing and I want to show you that I know it, right? It has to do with processing it and kind of letting it percolate. And so oftentimes memes, purposeful or otherwise, be it through a mistake or through working through, are representing things in ways that are most optimistically imperfect and sometimes just outright lies. And yet sometimes that becomes still a very effective space for people to get dragged into these conversations. And honestly, if someone looks at one of my memes and says like, but I didn't really mean that, I would think that that's still a good thing, that they're attracted to it and are able to have that thought, right? It firms up their potentially or theoretically greater understanding of something like Bataille if they're able to correct me. And yeah, just it's forcing people to think of an elephant, you know, it's, yes.
I'd say if I could mention something on that same note, I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine a few nights ago. And keep in mind, throughout my entire experience in life thus far, I have not met another person who is like super into theory or anything. Like some people I'll meet, they'll be like, yeah, I like philosophy, Aristotle school. Or they'll be like, yeah, I'm a Stoic. And it's like, whatever. Not really interested in that. But I had this buddy, and he did debate in both high school and college. And he was like a K-heavy policy debater. And so I started talking about something the other night, and he brought up D&G. And I was like, wait, what? You read Deleuze? And he was like, oh, hell yeah. And we had like a probably hour-long conversation just talking about theory. But the thing that I got out of that conversation, and it's one thing that does sort of, it's something I keep running into in the community of people who are into theory, especially younger people like me. most of them got into these writers through debate, through policy debate. And I think that's cool. I love policy debate. But I think that's led to a lot of people who are into continental philosophy or just critical theory in general. They see the writers more as a means to an end. If they see these authors through the lens of pure utility for their own arguments. It's like I was talking to the buddy the other night, and I was talking about how much I fucking love Bataille. I mean, you've seen my account. It's fake Ossifail, and I just got like 3 Bataille books. I fucking love Bataille. And this dude was like, "Oh, but Bataille sucks though." And I was like, "How does Bataille suck?" And he was like, "It doesn't make sense." I was like, "No, it definitely does make sense." And he was like, "Well, every time I've seen someone run Bataille, it's been bad." I'm like, that's because he's not a very good author for debate. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the idea of general economy works very well in some arguments in debate. But the fact that he could only see Bataille through such a myopic lens of just one little bit of his entire set of ideas, I guess, just all of the stuff he has written, all of the stuff he has theorized, and that little bit of general economics is the only thing that shines through in debate. No one talks about the Summa Theologica. No one talks about, his theory of religion is related, but no one even talks about Ossifail really, or any of the Nietzschean stuff, which it just kind of blows my mind. Anyway, that was my point. I'm sorry for rambling.
No, it's great. A couple things in response to that would be that, it's Bataille is definitely not a great author for debate because he is acephalic, right? He is in his best formation, without a head, without this kind of strictly royal science type background where everything is argued through in this really discrete way. Instead, it's this experiential philosophy where it's not necessarily about the thought, it's about the affect and about the movement through space, which is, again, one of the reasons why he's one of my favorite philosophers. Also, there you go. This there's new printing. Did you? It's by what's it called? Abraxas Press and
it's a
what's that?
Contagion Press.
Oh well, the yeah, this new one just came out from you can get it through Abraxas, which is this queer anarchist spot out in Portland, Maine, and I would suggest people try to drag that into their lives. But also, it's when it comes to this idea of people thinking through policy and then kind of having an organization that they're trying to fit something into, with their conclusions already kind of drawn. You see that happening all the time, of course, but it's one of the Deleuze and Guattari, even though they are extremely esoteric in some ways, are still logical and sensible enough that someone like the IDF could use them to justify what they're doing, right? And so by being legible, you make yourself you produce the opportunity that someone ironically kind of reads you wrongly just through that legibility, and so you're able to be fit into this slot so that someone can do something really dreadful with your work. And you can do the same thing with a type of illegibility, but no one is going to take very few policy people are going to take an illegible text like Bataille's work seriously enough to use it as an excuse, which is one reason that I think something like art and literature and just generally kind of aesthetic spaces are actually genuinely important socially, because of the fact that they make for a space of unseriousness and illegibility so that it can't be weaponized in the same way, right? Math can be weaponized very easily. You see math weaponized every day. You see statistics weaponized every day. Very infrequently, unless it's being used as some kind of bizarre, like Fox News thing, you very rarely see like a painting get weaponized. You might see Dr. Seuss or something, but that's something that fades away very, very quickly and is ultimately not very effective unless someone already has a thought that they want to kind of work through. That was kind of a rambling, weird thing. But God, I had one last thought, but it has evaporated. It is gone.
Now, I feel like I'm taking up a ton. Sorry.
Oh,
sorry,
no,
I found my thought. But sorry, Beyond, sorry. What was that?
No, it was quick too. Just adding on to that, maybe Batai. I mean, what is the utility of a meme? You know, it's so many things. It's an expression. It's a tool. It helps you this, but I don't know. There's something there with it's kind of like the debris of like the internet. You know, anybody can do it. It's just there. So I don't know. I think there's something there with like memes and maybe art in general, but memes as an expenditure. Maybe that you know why it's harder to co-opt. Although I guess you know plenty of people have co-opted the Pepe and whatnot. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
But no, that's great though. But the thing about the aesthetics and the way that it's co-opted, and you know something like you know Pepe or whatever, is that you can always fucking just take it back. You can always co-opt it again. Like this is something that constantly happens, and that's kind of maybe that's a better way of saying what I was kind of aiming for to begin with. But this idea that the aesthetic space isn't something like memes, and because they are kind of expenditure and because they are just ultimately gestures, when someone is using them in a way that is ultimately really vile, you can just, you know, use it the other way. Like there aren't rules to this. You can fucking make it mean whatever you want. And so that's the thing that makes it powerful, and also the thing that makes it dangerous. But it's the fact that it becomes flexible. But kind of the thought that I had before that that connects is this. We get in trouble sometimes for like memeing Dugan or like Nick Land or people like that. And the thing is that or even like Bataille sometimes, like people are weird about all sorts of thinkers where they end up putting them in a box and saying you're not allowed to talk about these people or like gesture to them at all. And the thing is that like if you're not making some kind of aesthetic motion or gesture or commentary on these people, then the worst people in the world will do it in your stead, right? Like if you are saying that there are certain types of aesthetic formations that you are not, should not, and cannot use, then the people that shouldn't be using them are going to be the people using them. So yeah, I mean, if Pepe is, you know, a fascist icon, it's only because of the fact that we've made it something that only fascists can use. Use Pepe. Oh yeah, like everyone use Pepe. It'll stop being a fascist thing immediately if everyone used Pepe.
I think to touch on that. I think to touch on that point, it's like I've always said that like, you know, ideas and like people that follow these ideas kind of gravitate towards like whoever has like the best and funniest memes. So if like there is, you know, a subject that is co-opted by, you know, something that you disagree with or don't like, then basically you just need to meme it more and meme it better and meme it in a funnier way to have people like gravitate towards like your reading or your idea of the subject.
Trump literally beat Clinton because he's funnier than she is. That is exactly what ended up happening, which is we had these two characteristically unlikable people, and one of them just happened to be able to make a lot of people laugh and make a lot of people angry. And so no matter what he was thinking, had nothing to do with policy or anything, because he had that kind of response and was able to attract people in that kind of way or repulse people, because honestly, comedy does and kind of should do both. He ended up, you know, fucking all of this, the last 4-year nightmare happened and continues on through, you know, Biden, because we just got tired of funny, I guess.
Hey, I just want to draw. So I think Duster and I think Kaya had little hands up before. If They wanted to say something.
Kaya was
Swastika's too far gone. Yeah, let's not try to bring it back.
Oh, fuck.
Kaya had the raise first. Kaya had their hand
Yeah.
first.
So I have an idea. How about meetings and mirror board, but about the battle, like how about not only like story of DI, because it's been memed a lot, but some of his works that aren't memed so much, like the accused share or the inner experience.
I'm sorry, I think I missed the first portion of that. Like doing
Like-
meetings to talk about those things?
Yeah, and mirror boards with memes.
Yeah. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna apologize while I still do it, which is something I told people not to do, but you know, but I am sorry, and I'm gonna make a pitch. I do actually run a philosophy and literature workshop every Saturday around this same time, and we do talk about Bataille quite a lot. We don't have a Miro board, but we should. If anyone's interested in that, link in bio. But yeah, do we have space on the Miro board for like Bataille specific stuff? I'd always be happy to see that. Or just paste it anywhere if it fits. I mean, Bataille and Deleuze, it's funny that he keeps on being brought up. And I think a lot of it's just because he's a little trendy right now, but also because I think Bataille and Deleuze are actually much closer thinkers than we often give them credit for. And I refuse to expand on that. No, I will. I just feel like I should shut up for a second. Does that kind of respond to what you were saying, Kaya? Or no, not at all?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. And what's up, Duster?
Oh, I just had like a part about the Rhizome chapter where it's like a curious note, I guess, like they constantly are changing the definition of a rhizome as it goes. First it's saying it's a book, and then it says it's not a book a couple days or a couple pages later. And then it's like a rhizome is this, a rhizome is that. And then it finally, like towards the end of the chapter, comes to saying that a rhizome is made of plateaus, and that Gregory Basin uses the word plateau to designate something very special, as in a continuous self-vibrating region of intensities whose development avoids any orientation towards a culmination point or external end. And previously it's kind of saying, you know, the rhizome acts on desire by external productive outgrowths. It's also, when it refers to the book, it says, the book is not an image of the world, it forms a rhizome with the world. And that like each point, a rhizome connects a point to any other point. And I got to thinking about, there's like the part about it's not reducible to one or the multiple, and it's other things that are not of the same nature. So if you got like a peanut butter and banana sandwich and like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, those things are not the same, but they have an element, which is the peanut butter, that is the same, that links them. And so thinking about it in the larger context of Instagram and memes, it's like all these memes, like maybe it's like, is the problem that the problem in this, that it is a sorry, I think I lost my it's something that avoids closing in any kind of concrete understanding of it, maybe. So it's like, maybe that's, if like somebody is looking to, and Baudrillard talks about this, but in Fatal Strategies, and he says things have begun to avoid a dialectic of meaning that was beginning to bore them by proliferating the extremes. And I feel like Deleuze is a machine. The Rhizome book of 1,000 Plateaus is a machine for proliferating the extremes beyond the Hegelian dialectic. Like it's just like out to the far end and the extreme close, and then just like pushing them as to their limit or whatever. I don't know. That's how I've been taking it. So it's like what we're doing when we're making memes is essentially avoiding the dialectic of meaning, because we're pushing these things to their extreme and we're not on the same page, I guess. It's like, and there's not just 2 points or 3 points or like this ascension between different points. It's like ascension of all points simultaneously, so that dialectic is like impossible, maybe. I don't know. That's like what has been spinning in my head this time. So I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that, but I'm pretty much done with the thought. Thank you for letting me say something.
Yeah. Go on.
Do you know like the openings, like I think it's like intro or first first plateau where it's talking about the biunivocal versus the polyvocal in the talking about like the Hegelian dialectic versus the multiplicity or the rhizome. I think it's like a very like it. I do think it's like a kind of a pretty like straightforward mathy form, and like that puts in like pretty good terms of like units and relations, and like just same parallel of like straight lines to curves. That something always escapes the dialectic. That like kind of like a structure of oversimplification. One way I've defined it is the dialectic is the form the image of thought takes in the authoritarian personality. So instead of I've kind of thought of think of Marx, okay, so if Bakunin was right that Marx is an authoritarian, how did that play out? Well, he was drawn to Hegel because of an internal disposition for an authoritarian form of thought, and then it kind of was a self-fulfilling prophecy to follow the dialectic in the structure of Marx's thought from then on. I mean, not to necessarily get into that, but just like as an example.
No, that's really cool. Do you mind if I message you?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, thanks.
We have a couple.
I think like the math stuff in Deleuze is some of like the most interesting stuff. I mean, even I think like what's also something is like Deleuze and Guattari, I think, are in 1,000 Plateaus and in Capitalism and Schizophrenia in general, have like really advanced economics and like clearly have read a lot, like unique theories on utility. He's clear, like he mentions like Pareto and like so does Jordan Peterson, right? So like in a sense, Deleuze and Jordan Peterson are do reference the same economist in different ways, but it's like a weird striking parallel that's like, I don't know, the irony isn't lost on me.
The irony of distributions. It's interesting. Thank you for that. In fact, Pareto distributions that like constant doubling into doubling into doubling is extremely kind of, you could view that in a very Hegelian lens or an innately Deleuzean one. And that's a thought that I'm going to have to format a little bit in the back of my mind as we talk. Ben and Victor have been waiting for a while. I think Ben was first.
Yeah, no, so I was just going to say, like on the topic of kind of dialectics, memes, and like Rhizome, I feel like I think one thing in particular, it's interesting, or at least to my understanding, is that I think in some ways when we're thinking of dialectics, we're thinking a lot more in like, you know, like a sense of a binary or two things kind of coming to something new, and a sense of kind of, you know, like a line in terms of progress, like two things always kind of going to something following. And I think with memes, that's never really the case. It's a lot more rhizomatic in the sense that like with a meme, you know, we're more interested in understanding like flows and things like that. Like we're much more interested in tracking flows rather than like a direct sense of progress and interaction. And I think it's kind of at the core of Deleuze and Guattari's sense of like communication. I think that kind of differs to something that would be more classically Hegelian, like where you're always kind of looking at that middle zone. There's never no beginning or end. It's always a middle between things, an interbeing and intermezzo. Yeah, different from like a tree where you have things that kind of branch off from each other or things that kind of separate and come together and things like that. But I think with a rhizome, at least, you're much more interested in that betweenness of things. And that's where I guess you kind of find how I guess new connections form and a sense of like progress, or like more so what changes in terms of a what's new or interesting in terms of like memes, I guess. Like when you're thinking of change, I guess it's interesting to think of it like as more so a change in the way these connections are made rather than in a direct way of how these two relationships before are kind of moving to one singular object. And you're more so interested in how you have all these kind of floating signs and ideas that are kind of in this whole, you know, area of Instagram, and how they're kind of redistributing their connections among each other. And kind of that's where kind of the new meaning is kind of made, I guess.
Yeah.
That means.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, there's a phrase that pops into my head, and it's obnoxious, but I like it. But there's an interpellation by interpolation, and what I would describe that as being is that as soon as a concept, a meme, a person, anything is born, it innately ends up, its identity itself is redefined by the context it's born into, even before it itself is able to produce an identity, right?
Yeah.
And if anyone's familiar with loss, right, the loss meme was originally, I mean, I'm sure half of you know this, maybe a couple of you don't, I don't know, but the loss meme started off as like a genuine webcomic by a guy that wanted to like tug on the heartstrings of his followers because he was a weird, manipulative, talentless hack. And then everyone saw it and they're like, that is hysterical, you fucked up. And so its identity changed innately by entering into the world of this kind of multiplicity of affects and kind of information bleeding both ways. And so by being interpolated into the world it's born in, it is called a name. It's interpellated, right, in this Althusserian sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so that happens with memes. Like as soon as you make a meme, its identity has changed entirely from the thing which you chose to make, right? It enters in the algorithm, and there's a whole other nightmare occurring there. But yeah, and this you know, n-1, one of the most important things about this multiplicity concept, especially when we're thinking of different objects interrelated into one another, is that the thing about multiplicity, the important thing about multiplicity that I think a lot of people forget, is that multiplicity doesn't just mean there are many within one. It in fact doesn't mean that. It means that there are many which might be arbitrarily delineated within one, but they leak in and out of that thing as well. Multiplicity necessarily has overlap with other objects. All objects are partial and extend beyond themselves, right? And that's how that kind of new contextualization occurs. It's because I, as Dorian, am not a multiplicity, as in I am many wolves inside of a t-shirt, but that I am many wolves inside of a t-shirt that is also innately connected to wolves outside of it, right? It's the whole fucking thing.
Sorry, Dorian, could you
That's my rant.
repeat repeat what you said? The multiplicity means all objects are partial, and what was the last part?
That
Or you
they're
said a phrase.
partial and I'm not sure what the phrase was. Partial and interrelated. I mean, partial and extend beyond themselves.
Oh yeah, that's what.
Wait.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sorry, just to say that objects are partial. I think this is from the faciality chapter, but I think we've sort of talked about, various points where D and G are explicitly going to say multiplicity has nothing to do with points. It's all lines, because points are always, in some sense, an accreation of an essence. We stopped here and this was what the circumstance was. Whereas the line, it crosses through, it doesn't leave a point, but it disturbs in its passing, but it leaves no point, which isn't to say that it's not meaningful or effective. So just to say partial objects, like D and G are going to say something along the lines of partial objects are the focus of the psychoanalyst, and they explicitly call out an analyst. I forget the name, I think Klein. But so what they're going to say then is it's not about the object as such. And this is an argument that I mount against object-oriented ontology when we're making fun Lego Graham Harman memes, which it doesn't matter that Dorian started it because there's no origin point. But so the point here, in some sense, the point of the line here, in some sense, would be it's not the partial objects, it's the various factors or contexts that I think Dorian was talking about, into which any object or system of parts move. So they're not parts of an object. That's the fragmentation that the D&G say we need to get away from, because we always stop at the multiple by thinking, we fragmented the one, we've now escaped from unity. What they want to say is this is a false understanding of the context, because what we actually have there are a variety of speeds and intensities, affects, activities all taking place, across this line, but none of them are ever at a point, because a point would be the object, and then we could fragment that point, blow it up. We could blow up a text. We could say, William Burroughs has, fragmented the soft machine with the cut up method. But so they say, but this never goes far enough away from the image, the world image of the book. We still have the unified book. So what they would want to say is something that we need to work towards, and maybe we don't get to, is the developing not the recognition of part objects, but the recognition of the fact that there aren't objects inside of the multiplicity. There are lines crossing each other, and I think we're like early on in the text they set up the difficulty of explaining this in this very Nietzschean way, where they say, we gave ourselves pseudonyms, so you wouldn't notice who we are, but we also kept our names so you wouldn't know who we are. Like they're constantly worrying about the limits of language. Like we don't really have the language to talk about the parts of multiplicity, but I think they do make it clear that the partial object is not what they're talking about. And they're constantly pushing up against the, I think before we were talking about the limit experience of this conversation of limit experience as a limit experience. Like we're constantly in this, but they want us to move towards it. And I think this is why you say, the fun thing to say, we wrote this together, since each of us was several, we're quite the crowd. Now this is a limit that we encounter. They're not they're talking about a crowd. They're not which sounds like a unity, and it's not a partial object, but it's certainly not a singularity. It's a crowd. So is that, I hope that's not too abstract, but I just find that they really do seem to abjure the term partial objects. I think I have a meme for this that I prepared weeks ago. I'll throw it into Miro, and it probably won't make anything clearer, but I think the idea of points or partial objects is something that they explicitly abjure. Not that we should ever take, these guys aren't sages. We don't need to go, oh, you gave us some cool quotes, now we need to respect your opinion. Because, also I've had a ton of fun with Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro quotes as well. So I'll leave that off there.
I think that's a valuable edit for sure.
It's like Grant Morrison's Batman Inc. when he starts the rumor that Bruce Wayne is Batman because he knows people won't believe the conspiracy, even if
Oh,
it's
that's funny.
true.
Victor, you're so patient. What's up?
Yes, what's up? Can you hear me well?
Yep.
I made a question in the chat before, and I really wanted to get your take on it. So just to get some context, I actually came from a STEM background, sort of, and I got into theory around 2017. I was writing my thesis on digital image forensics, and I caught some Facebook page that was doing memes, and some of you have been starting following from that time. I think Deleuze and Dragons at least. And I got into a problem in my research that was like, I was working on image forensics, which is like, is this image true? Is this image false? Can we link images to devices and things like that? Can we talk if an image has any value as an artifact? And I was finding out that there was actually no any judicial system on earth that had a proper system to deal with this. How do we tie these digital objects to actual things where we make decisions on people's lives? Because at one point, well, we can do statistics, machine learning, define things that say this image is fake or true based on some metrics. But it's not like proper forensics where you shoot a gun and you match the bullet with the gun and you can say, according to this scratches, this happens, and we know that if these guns were shot, there's a whole causality that say this is tied to crime. But with digital images, this is not kind of the same. Because really, if you get a digital object that's already a copy, there's really no way to say that this came from something or if this corresponds to a scene, because you can have two digital images that can be 100% constructed synthetically or in a studio. So you cannot link a digital media object to something that happened in the real world. And STEM doesn't prepare us for this sort of question. I did not really know how to deal with the sort of epistemological problems. And one thing that got me really into when I started looking at these authors, a lot of them I didn't read honestly. Like I got most of the things from secondary readings or comments, because after so many years, it's hard to go back and do a whole background and have time to do these readings. But one thing that caught my attention about most of these authors, and I think it's relevant to the meme discussion, it's really phenomenologically to me, it seems that everything is kind of about mnemonics. When you think about why this thing catch, why this linguistic aspect caught on, why this mimetic aspect of whatever, and it just seems that there's some entropy optimization that somehow it makes it easier for this to caught on, right? And it's not necessarily about an individual or a community. It's, I would say, for better, I don't know if from the terminology, if it's assemblage is the real term that I should be using here, but it's really whatever cuts on linguistically, mimetically, whatever, it's because it optimized some entropy for something. And so this, I said, isn't it phenomenologic at the end, just everything about some mnemonics? And this is what I wanted to hear your guys' takes on. So about a long introduction, but this is what I really want to ask.
God, there's so much there.
So, but does it make sense what I'm saying, or am I completely far off of what you? Don't you think that mnemonic is at the key point of almost what everything stands and perpetuates, meme-wise also? Like, why does someone reproduce a meme? There's some mnemonic response. You find this funny, you optimize some function in your brain that thinks this is worth to be spread, even if it is just to get some dopamine response or etc. But there's something that's trying to optimize some entropic propagation. Like, this is funny, I think if I post this, people will like, it will give a positive feedback. This, I don't think so, but maybe I'm wrong also. Like, I'm not at that point where I'm not a good meme appraiser, a good meme sommelier or whatever. And then I'm not regulating with what will propagate. But at one point, if I keep doing it, I will achieve a sort of syntony with a group or something like this. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I very rarely feel as if I'm making my memes, because I generally feel like what's happening is that, and this has a certain like form of narcissism, a backwards narcissism in it probably, but this sense that what's actually occurring is that there's just an accretion of these outside forces and causes that are forcing me to make the meme, like the algorithm made me do it. And so I think that, I mean, my response to a lot of what you're saying is simply that, yeah, I agree. I mean, I do think that there are these wider forces that are ultimately just aiming for, as if we can assign them volition, but some kind of optimization of entropy or entropy optimization that is forcing all of this into occurring. But I don't know what additional commentary to give to it other than yeah, I don't think I'm in control of anything. I mean, I call myself a hard-ish determinist at this point. So I mean, so yes.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, I don't make as much memes as you, and some of you it's a daily thing. I think you said you were doing memes while you were listening to this, so it's a natural thing you're doing. But whenever and again, I haven't done my reading, but what I get, especially from Lacan, what it tells it. Now tell me if this is a bad understanding when it talks about the sort of the what's this term, the subject of the, what's this Lacanian thing that he has, the subject of the alteration and the subject of the
Enunciation.
Yeah, well, there's this larger thing that you are. So it's like, okay, you're in your cognitive process, you think you're picking from a choice of next words to say or next things to do, but there's like a curtain of something that just gives you things, pick from these 5 objects or pick from these 10 objects. And cognitively, this is what's happening every second in your brain somehow, right? But this thing that is behind the curtain and is giving you these 10 objects, why this 10 and not some other? It's because of something that is sort of in the subconscious or super conscious or something like this. And in the way, when you're doing memes every day, these objects that you're getting, where do they come from exactly? Like this constant choices you're getting. And okay, I got this idea, I want to make this meme from something now. Was this because you just saw this event 2 hours ago, you read some news, and how this thing that clicks into something that you're going to put it and materialize into a meme in Photoshop or whatever. Where did that seed come from, as far as you can tell? Like, what's its provenance? Does it make sense what I'm saying? Isn't optimizing some entropic process that you're just position yourself in this position? Again, you say you don't feel like this when you do your memes, right?
Yes, sorry, I'm not clear on the entropic process.
I think the answer is yes, because the high trust visual content stuff, like, you know, the memes everybody makes fun of where it's like, or like the infographic, like that particular style of art that they use with like the cartoons. It's called high trust visual content because it's like everything, it's like you can trust the source of the image. It's not that everybody likes that aesthetic, it's because it's high trust visual content. So I think what Victor is trying to say is like the images you're pulling from all over the internet, be it a news source, and correct me if I'm wrong, Victor, but I think I'm getting at what you're saying. It's like the images, the composite materials that make the memes, where are those coming in the context of digital forensics? And if those are part of a larger entropic process that the individual units that are memeing are not aware of. Is that what you're getting at, Victor?
Partially, yes, because in the end, when you say he asked what is minimizing entropy, right? And then you get to, okay, maybe it's the entropy of, like you said, the trust of the image. So if I see an image, if I see loss, it clicks in my brain very, very quickly, and I recognize and I really give some attention to it. So there's a part of my brain, there's a part of my being now that already knows a lot about loss or has seen this enough that you will devote some attention to this. Just, is this good loss? Is this, etc. So in a way, loss has become a very powerful entropic symbol. So it can convey a lot of information. If you see loss, the way we were talking about some other symbols or whistleblowers, etc., it will trigger a response into many people's brains. So it is really an object that has a high entropic value. If you think that randomly, if it pops in people's feeds or people see it, it elicits a higher response on people. So it becomes an important token. Like every word in every language at one point was created by someone. Someone maybe taught it for the first time or said, and then it kind of got into place. And then people started using it. It became an item on a dictionary of symbols that you're using. And this symbol behind it has some connections in the context of every other symbol that you use. And memes kind of now, they also sit in this place where they are some token. I posted a link to a study that's called multimodal neural networks. Multimodal neural networks that talks a bit about people that have been studying image text neural networks, and they found some weird spaces inside their brain, some semantic spaces that they're spaces for that you can read them as imaginary universes. There's a neuron for Spider-Man, there's a neuron for the Pokemon universe, and it has associated with it another series of neurons, and it's reducing some entropy. It's seeing everything, it's munching, and it's creating these smaller entropy spaces where things that appear together often will appear together there. You know, and I feel like in the end, I cannot escape everything you read that is just this that we're doing. Oh, this is existing. You're just minimizing some entropic space where things that occur together will occur more together until something comes and messes it around. And this is what I'm telling about mnemonics. This is my intrinsic feeling when I read all of theory. Everyone is just talking about the same thing, and it might just be my background. But at the end, it's just, it seems that everything just, difference in repetition is all about this. Because you need some difference to be able to fit in better some things that are appearing new in the real, and then eventually it has to repeat, and then it has to, you have to keep, yeah.
Wait, out of curiosity, Victor, so you said you come from STEM?
Yeah, I have a computer science background.
Oh, okay, cool. I have a neuroscience, I'm neuro, but it's just interesting when you're talking about things like neural networks, and I think honestly there's a lot of interesting applications with a lot of ideas of like rhizome and connections, and we're talking about ideas of differentiation without direct identity.
Yeah.
Specifically in the context of the brain too. I took a class a couple semesters ago on neurogenesis, and it's really interesting about the ways that neurons kind of developed their own networks and these kind of like rhizomatic connections, and they eventually kind of build these stratified like kind of works of like organization. You know, is that it's really like an idea of firing patterns rather than direct identity, you know. So we're talking about difference in local organizations, local associations that kind of lead to the development of something, of some form of a fluid identity that's very plastic and changeable. But you know, we're talking more so about repetition of these kind of like these associations over time, which is kind of just interesting, because I don't know, I like to kind of think about like in associations between like things like, you know, the way neurons are kind of firing and neuronal development in regards to like these ideas of difference and repetition, which I think is what you were kind of getting on at some point, or at least there's a lot of, I think there is definitely connections with that when you're talking about computer science and neural networks a lot. But I think there's definitely this idea of like, you know, repeating flows in a way.
Exactly. I'm good. Just going to paste a link here. So this is like one neuron that is associated with the concept of USA, like America, in this neural network. This is a tool that you can use. It's called Microscope from OpenAI. And it gets what sort of things excites this American neuron. And you have both visual things, both depictions of American flags, text, and things. But this neuron, I just put it as an entry point, but there are several neurons in there that if you think about it, you can identify. There's like a Buddhism neuron in this paper that they talk about this. They really found so many, like you said, differentiate identities that were just basically a stable point of all the data that people crunched into it. So whatever comes from the data set, and we must assume that these data sets at one point, they have more information than a human can cram into a lifetime. Like if you think about this text processing, like GPT-3, what human read all Wikipedia and read all of the text? No one is doing this. So if you have a neural network that has a semantic stable entropic optimal model of this, it's really some kind of godly being, even if you don't want to assert some actual like life to this. Right? Because no human being alive has read all Wikipedia or will read. There's just not enough hours for you to process that amount of information and munch into that. But yeah, sorry, I'm already riffing too far. Thank you for allowing me to discuss these cool points.
I don't feel like really qualified at all to respond in this, given that all of my background is in like literary studies. But in some sense, like when we talk about mnemonics and maybe like, you know, like an entropy here, and I feel like I'm intuiting towards where it was going hopefully at the end, but like if you say that, you know, when you read theory, everyone's whether they're talking about or like proposing mnemonics, I might sort of like, I feel like then it's going about it in the worst possible way. If my understanding of mnemonics is in any way close to, and in some sense, like actually, and as far as like memeing theory goes, I would think that we're in some sense increasing entropy. So I like, or maybe this is also like my intuition of, you know, fields that I feel like I understand the words. I have no understanding of what's going on with people who actually, you know, have studied this, because I've, you know, my time is video games and breaking Lovecraft to pieces. So yeah, but I do feel that, like, you know, it's destabilizing, meaning it's sort of ruining your capacity to recall. Like, even as I think both Dory and I have said, like, you know, we using memes to sort of further your analysis maybe works, but it in some sense, like, I feel like it completely destabilizes all the concepts that I should, if I'm academically responsible. You know, and you get some freedom the further on you go in academia to be irresponsible. I would say that, yeah, I'm blowing up all of the stability that possibly could have been there, and I'm misremembering things almost as a matter of praxis. I would say, because what I remember, this is constantly, you know, messing with my capacity to move forward. You know, I don't need, like, you know, and Deleuze says something like, and I'm bowing out to a sage here in a way that I would say is explicitly anti-Deleuze. I think, you know, Deleuze sort of talking about, you know, not just not remembering, but not having much interest in attaching his thought and desire to things that he's not working on in the current. So you say, you know, I think it's a pretty clear, like, you know, Lovecraft has very strange readings of authors, and I think a lot of it comes because he doesn't go back to them. He goes, fuck, that's a great idea, and then runs. And it destroys the author in some sense, increases the entropy of the text, and also, you know, and ruins the capacity to have any access to what was actually at stake at the time. And this reminds me of this, you know, I think it sort of comes up in in ATP, but he mentions this in an interview in Negotiations, where he says, someone says, why do you and Guattari always rely on literature? What about philosophy? What about theory? And he says, well, something along the lines of, is it our fault that the authors such as, like Burroughs and Kafka come to mind straight away because they're my kind of thing, but Burroughs and Kafka know more about schizoanalysis than psychoanalysis or psychology. So like it strikes me that memory is always going to be reconstruction towards unity, and schizoanalysis, like when we remove it from the clinical setting, is always about the analysis of how to affect the break and how to create affective and effective breaks, which strikes me that it is entropic as far as I take it to be. And it's sort of an anti-mnemonic device because it's sort of, it refutes like what I take, the whole project of Hegelianism and psychoanalysis to be, which would be to say, to finally reunite with what happened and integrate my subject, knowing what happened, fully back into a community that is completely outlined for me, that it may no longer, be destabilized. So yeah, I feel like I'm maybe like just completely misunderstanding Victor, as I've like outlined at the start. I don't feel qualified to respond to this. But
this last part, I think you got to it when you talk about, because what I was talking about the mnemonics is like when you think about, okay, why this really happened? Why this turn happened into English where you drop this sound, or why did this culture choose this or over that? In the end, it always look at there's kind of a mnemonic justification down. And what you say is, yeah, the goal is to kind of break it, because it is kind of what defaults the control. It is what kind of is a default state that if you are acting unconsciously, if you are just reacting, this is what you're going to follow. There is always a sort of a mean distribution, especially when you talk about entropy. It's all about some mean distribution where you have plateaus, you have basins of concentration, things sort of stabilize about an attractor. And I think that, I don't know if Deleuze and Guattari talk specifically about that, but Delanda talks about this in his assemblage theory about this thing where you have these attractors, you have these singularities in reality. Like a language is a singularity, right? Like the whole population of people who speak English or the whole population of people who speak German, it is sort of an entropic average. And you can have some statistics, like for instance, you can think, if you have to choose one language to learn that will increase, let's say, your average quality of life. This was a discussion I have to someone. One of the best languages is German, actually, because if the word of English speakers, the Anglo-speaking world, you have a very wide variation of quality of life, wage distribution, and etc. But if you look at the German world, you have Germany and Austria, and both of them have an extremely separate economic bubble. So if you think about this sort of stable blocks of entropy, you have it's assemblage in the end. I think it all comes back to assemblage. But like you said, the goal of psychoanalysis is to kind of break it. You have to learn how it works to break it, to be yourself an individual or the body without organs or whatever sort of self-realizing philosophy you're trying to achieve, if that's where you're going for, right? But I was much more in the sense of, to me, every time I try to think of theory, why they are talking about, why they're creating all the systems, these things, the causalities just seems, well, that was what the best mnemonic was to maximize for some entity at the time. That entity could have been, I don't know, the Roman Empire or some small community who had actually the most resources to move something or whatever at that point determined the swing of the history, right? If we're going to be Hegelian about it. Does it make sense what I'm saying? And it's really, it's like Chinese language, for instance, it has a lot of mnemonization of basic processes, like their whole 5 elements thing gives you some basics of how to cut wood, how to turn some basic elements. And this kind of makes so that as a language, if you know this language, you know more basic things to how to control your environment around you. So it's giving you some entropic control. Right, and every language must have some kind of aspect, like if it sort of stabilizes around some sort of strata of what it needs. But yeah,
it's like
so
the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis of memes, kind of thing. But language produces cognition, produces language, kind of back and forth. I mean, sorry, because I was having some connection issues, so I've missed a little bit of this, but some thoughts that pop into my head based on a lot of that is that, so I'm under the impression that a lot of what you're talking about is that language, as an example, is always attempting to produce in these entropic terms, the most efficient way to connect a concept to a communicative unit, right? So,
yeah,
right. So
I think Duster said like the same about creating this trust mechanism, and language is also about that, right? You're reducing the noise in communication. You're
right.
assuming that you can sort of, this is the codification, decodification aspect from
right.
Yeah.
But the problem and the virtue of memes is that, I mean, they work so well because so many memes are really just like gluing one or two or three things together. It's just like, oh, you know, this is William S. Burroughs, but he's also Lovecraft. Guess he's a racist and a homophobe. Like some kind of dumb joke there. But the thing with memes is that they so efficiently are able to combine disparate or proximal things together that they can kind of over codify themselves into losing all kind of signification. They become empty signifiers by being over codified because they just bring in everything, and they're constantly bringing everything. And so the meaning of a meme, by being overly meaningful, becomes meaningless, right? And so it snowballs and then erases itself in this funny way.
But because they trigger this grammatical response we have to several sort of, it looks like when you see loss, but how is it defined? It's not necessarily like you have on your background a very abstraction of it, but this is we are recognizing a grammatical structure, but we could fill it with anything, and this is generally what the loss format is. You try to fit in with some other visual thing. And a meme as a visual means it's kind of like sugarcoating things so that your brain really just absorbs. It triggers a lot of grammatical responses, a lot of mnemonical responses, and you're like, yeah, this is true. And the Wojak, especially when I don't know if this is all for Wojak, but this general format of like Virgin versus Chad, for instance, you are creating a few deflections of what's the real point, but you're eliciting an emotional response that's also a cognitive response, and you just kind of accept it, right? And I think you're not really processing it beyond but it gives you some. It's I don't know if it's just serotonin, dopamine. Ben, who's know more about neuro, can say whatever, but it's exciting. A lot of cognitive things, and we want you to share. You want to share. There are some friends you want to share who will agree with you. Some friends you may want to provoke, but you want to keep exciting this network even beyond your individual sort of thing. And this is something that I'm originally from Brazil, and you have no idea how much the meme culture has dominated the whole public discourse. People just live on this. And also the whole politics. Bolsonaro's campaign was basically meme, and it's so far is. And it has dominated people who were 5 years ago, like parents and uncles who had no access to phones, through WhatsApp and Facebook. They were just included. They were like connected to the plug to the matrix, so to say. I had several friends that I had to take the phone off my dad because he spends the whole day into this bubble, and he's crazy. He's like, I don't know if in America it's kind of the same. Maybe it's kind of the same, but I think since the digitalization occurred a bit later in Brazil, the people are even less protected against this effect. So you see families being completely destroyed. The complete public democratic sphere was disintegrated. It was not really WhatsApp destroyed. If you use WhatsApp, I don't know if it's common in America, but like now you cannot send something forward to more than 5 or 10 people. And WhatsApp included this because of Brazil, because the velocity to fake news was spreading, and also with lobbying. I think that Bannon was part of the supporting team from Bolsonaro's campaign, and they sold him some of these tactics. It was just propagating misinformation. I don't know if any other democratic country had this sort of thing, but and it's just because it's simple coding information and excites, and Brazilians are very easily excited. Maybe you can tell. And it was just funny seeing my country be completely set ablaze by memes, and
Yeah.
no discussion can occur. Maybe you experience the same in America. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, our political discourse is almost entirely like social media, right? Like, where else do you fucking talk to anyone about politics?
But
Why
do
do
you?
you, well, do you go onto Facebook? If you go onto Facebook, you do it to talk about politics mostly. You do it to argue with, you know, there's some guy sitting in his truck with his aviators on, right? But yeah, and it is viral, right? I mean, sorry, I didn't even mean to say that, but yeah, I mean, memes have a virality to them. You know, it's a very much what like Burroughs is saying about language is it's a virus from outer space. It takes you over and it passes itself on, and it finds more and more efficient ways of passing itself on with over or under codification. And yeah, it's wrecked things for us. I mean, memes killed my family.
And I've been guilty of this too. So a lot of times the time it takes for me to consider, should I really be sending this forward? Is this really something I want to go on and pass to the world? But sometimes it's just too funny, or I just want to make it like shit posting. I think like plays in this edge a lot. But sometimes a shit post can get into the wrong group and have the completely opposite effect that was intended.
I don't remember making a lot of memes, let alone sharing them. It's such an automatic kind of compulsion almost. So it's interesting to see how much of my externalized thought and affect that I'm sharing with the world is stuff that I am apparently so limitedly conscious of. And so my politics, and we're going to treat memes and social media as politics, my political praxis, if you would be so daring to call it that, and it's not praxis, but my praxis is independent of my own consciousness to a certain degree, and that's kind of terrifying and really interesting. My communication is a separate entity from me. I am I am MK ultraing myself into a catboy. That's true.
Can I just just like to jump in around sort of the you know the grammatology of the meme some degree, because I think, you know, when we're talking about, say, you know, something like Wojak or loss, sure, there is a grammar, and you know, and they are in some sense, you know, trapped in that sort of fragmented signification that that sort of, you know, D&G see as, you know, containing sort of like a crypto unity that they think we need to get past. And of course, this is very difficult, maybe because of mnemonic structures or, you know, capacities to communicate. And also, you know, even as we, you know, warp and destroy our memories, or, you know, create new affects and powers, you know, largely as jokes, and then they become, you know, they gain a different kind of valence in political discourse. I think we also need sort of addressing like the kind of things that are posted on meme pages that aren't strictly attached to the grammar of memes. So I would say, you know, I think most of my posts now, I think quite a lot of Dorian's and beyond works, you know, exist outside of that sort of grammatical structure. A lot of it, and I think I relate to Dorian on this, is to say, I've just realized I've posted something, it's flowed through, and it's, you know, it's attached to my readings. So maybe the reading is the reading of theory is the grammar in itself, but it's not attached to sort of a noticeable structure such as, you go, that's a Wojak meme. And, you know, saying, is that a loss now, is a meme in itself as a response to a meme. Like, we sort of, I think part of the point here is like, you know, it's useless because this isn't a praxis, and it's not even an artistic praxis. But, you know, posting from these sort of, you know, rhetorical grammatical channels, say like what we would, you know, brutishly call theorygram, or my favorite subsection of that, sword and sorcerygram, we aren't really, you know, we're not necessarily memeing, I think, according to grammar. We're working at this level, like I think as Dorian mentions, like over codifying, which is, you know, this is one of the elements of what D&G call the minor literature. This is a deterritorialization of language, and it's the development of of new group enunciations. Now, the terrible pushback on that is once it becomes, that always risks the capture of the popular form, which becomes, I think in some sense reduced to, and I will say reduced to memory and communication, but communication as command rather than creation as movement. And this, I think, relates to, I think, both Plateaus 4 and 5, when they get into, regimes of science and postulates of linguistics, and they talk, so the teacher doesn't tell me something so I learn it. They tell me so I know what to do. And so when we do, the lost meme, I know how to react to it. It gives me, whatever sort of neurotransmitter hit that I get, fantastic. But it tells me what to do. And I think that part of what maybe theorygram is doing and what theory is doing, certain theorists and certain, I'm not trying to say that I'm doing this, but it feels like we're moving towards, escaping the command signifier. And this is only ever done when we create new forms. And I think there's something interesting here in that, you might think, like, I think, man, this is, I post something here, yeah, this is fucking dope. This is good. And then it gets like no likes. I'm like, well, I'm maybe like, I get this disappointment, like, where's my clout at? But also it's like, then I know that, like, in some sense that has escaped the capture because maybe it's not accessible. Or maybe it's like only accessible to a few people, but it's still done something, and it's increased my capacity. Like, the assemblage for me at this point, whether it's to work on my thesis, or I've just really enjoyed making it for like 15 minutes on a shitty image that no one else cares about. Or I've increased, my understanding of a text that I probably have no idea about. But these, I think, escape that grammatical form, escape mnemonics, and, but always, increasing destructive potential. Because I think there are these memes, like, or posted from meme pages that might not be memes. We would still call them memes because there are meme pages that have what I would, I really like this from Andrew Kolb's Dank Deleuze. We replace, we're not creating concepts, we're destroying worlds, okay? We have a hatred for this world, which is, I think, like in Nietzsche, which I think D&G really pick up on, we don't escape God without the death of language. And I think, things like loss and Wojak, which I will always make these memes. I'm an addict. These things, we're back in the hands of God, and we're not willing to take on, the problem that maybe, I think, even like, say, something like literary modernism gives us, which is, to say, I recognize the rules so I can break them. Well, I'm still stuck in the rules. I'm just breaking them.
This is a question, like you said, you break grammar, but for instance, when you think about meme formats, I think your page, at one point, you use a lot this format where you have like a fantasy image, like, I don't know, from an RPG book or something, and then you get every element in it, the big monster or whatever, and you put some name of something. This a lot of pages use this. This was a popular format, and but there's a grammar in there. You look at this and you say, okay, this is a scene of conflict, and then you look at each individual element and you're like, okay. There's generally, after a while, you get it all there about the same. You have some underdog, some big challenge, and some conflict. Sometimes you have a bit other players, and you have variations. But after a while, you realize that it's all the same narrative grammar, right? And most meme formats have a really hard time breaking this. Like, I approve this, I disapprove this, and I'm portraying someone approving or disapproving, but my end goal in this grammar, if you evaluate this, is there's some form of judgment of approval or disapproval over this thing. And it's very rare to break this level of the grammatic tree. When you go the syntax, oh, you're using a fantasy image or whatever you're trying to break, at the end, they kind of come to the same. Don't you agree how?
Oh. Look, I absolutely agree. And so when it's, giant monster, Lacan, little hero, like Deleuze, a little dog, Guattari or something, or like, yeah, I understand. Of course, there's an absolute grammar to that. It's got a narrative grammar to it. I understand this, but like part of this, and I keep saying this is impossible. Like, I think someone mentioned like closing around language. Like, the problem here is, yeah, I'm stuck in expressing things grammatically, but always like not in those things. I feel like they're the laziest meme form there is. Also, the most pleasurable to make. It's like, it's just like sculling wine or something. it's just easy to do. So then you do this, but I think there's always this like hope that we can get beyond this. And like, I don't think D&G do it themselves. They note that Burroughs doesn't do it, even though he's like obsessed with the idea of language as a virus and turning it into a horrible disease that puts a rash on your genitals and makes you erupt with anal mucus. Like, but even in this, we see like you're still giving us the grammar of polite disgust in a world that has rejected being polite. Like we still understand that, but I think like part of the point here is that sometimes where and I think maybe theory is always doing this mnemonics, but I think it's always trying to not. It's like the which now I'm falling into the trap of saying what something is. And I'll probably the ghost of Deleuze will probably appear behind me and take me from behind, but I'm not a good enough philosopher for that yet. So but yeah, so I do agree, but that the hope is always the destruction of this world, which in some, like I think the Nietzschean sense, and I think very much the when D&G talk about new gods and people, new earths and new peoples, I think there's a reason that they get so hung up on psychoanalysis and structural linguistics, because these really are the trap. And now I feel like you have a better, like there's a couple of people who have a better grasp of the sort of like the maybe like neurolinguistics, or like sort of the processing of the physiology and neurochemistry of this. But there is this dumb impulse in me that in art we're trying to create these effects that will, I'm not sure how my accent comes across, but affects with an A that at least give us the momentary gap between the strata of one grammar and the grammar to come. I don't think we'll ever escape it.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying like, okay, we're always trying to get past what's the current grammar or break it. But at one point, even if it's a stabilized, it's so crystallized, it can be used for sort of infinite generation. Like, I don't know if you remember this old comics, like dinosaur comics, where there was just the same panel with some interaction between two dinosaurs, and it went for like years and years. And that was infinite teams. You could read 100 of them, and it would look like it would be completely 100 stories, because there was the grammar was just so free to allow it, right? And mathematically, if we go about it, there's Gödel's theorem, incompleteness theorem, that kind of says if you have such a stable expressive formal system where you can express everything, you will be able to express inconsistencies. And then this is something that we cannot move sort of beyond them. But it's good. It's exactly like you're saying. It's a movement of deterritorialization and re-deterritorialization. It is expanding. Because at one point, the interaction with the other or with the real will require a new grammar. Things just you can never really find. So you need to break it at some point. So there's this constant movement. And like I said, I think the artist is at the forefront of breaking this thing and all senses, like making new aesthetics. This is my belief as someone from STEM. This is what I think that is the most value of art, is completely breaking, creating this new these grammars.
I mean, one of the only consistent things about the universe and about it phenomenologically as well as ontologically that I would be willing to point out would be that things are unstable, right? That I mean, we have entropy for a reason, things evolve for a reason. Things either have inherent gaps in them or something that's a little bit too much. And so when we think about these grammars, and we think about these stratums, and we think about these logics, we're thinking about things that are only stable in the sense that they're stable for now. But the fact that they exist at all means that they are broken and that they have these exceptions that are inbuilt. And so when we're talking about using and reusing a grammar, we're also necessarily talking about using it until it erupts, right? It's like, it's like making, it's like breeding, right? Every time you create another person or another whatever, another wolf, you induce mutation. And so every time that you repeat something, difference increases. And each bit of difference is inherently, a repetition or some kind of interrelation. And so the reusage of these grammars is part of what's necessary to change it or to destroy it. And then ironically, and sorry, I'm going to bring in like Kristeva and then like do this whole thing with it, but when you're doing something like abjecting, when you're showing disgust or trying to remove something from yourself, you're using something that repulses you as a way to shore up and delineate your own boundaries. And so when we are destroying something, when there are faults in something, these still serve to justify and realize and reify the structure that it broke from, right? And so there's this constant feeding back and forth where stability and repetition leads to breaking and newness, and breaking and newness is another way of just repeating the same old shit over and over again. And so you see in experimental memes are just stable memes, and stable memes are experimental memes, and it just flows back and forth forever.
Yeah, that's, and there's this cycle where if it goes too fast and it becomes popular too fast, it will be burnout and soon become, I don't know, cringe or whatever. Or
yeah, no, absolutely. Like a dank meme is only dank if it's actually like funny or entertaining or interesting to people. But as soon as it's interesting or entertaining to enough people, it loses its dankness. It's the Kurt Cobain problem that Mark Fisher was always going on about. It's you're popular because you're against being popular, and then it traps you, and you end up shooting your head off in a greenhouse somewhere.
Which will only make you more popular.
Exactly.
And in the end, your point, they will just like I would just commercialize you more, right?
Yeah. This was a cry for help, by the way.
Yeah. But when you said something that about this individualization, because at one point it's when you look back and you think how much similar things are to me where you define your identity. There's a problem of identity. Someone has been talked about this before. And it's really weird to think that people who live in the same city, you rarely think them as your own family or something. And I don't know, it depends on where you are, the community. Like I think especially Americans, they have a very strong individuality. So you go out in the street and you don't see a bunch of yourselves. You just see other competitors in some weird game. But you have some sort of solid defined boundaries, and like Americans don't like touching as much as, for instance, Latin people, right? And this boundary is defined also as in the physical sense. So you feel that someone is infringing even your individuality if someone just comes you don't know and hugs you or kisses you in the cheek, right? And this is something that, okay, what's your individual level where you can look back and see I relate to this thing? Where's the other line? Where do you draw the line? And for the Latin world, like COVID has been really hard, like for Latin people not being able to like go to your grandpa and touch it. Like Italy, this is why Italy was the first worst big case like in Europe, because people could not believe this is so fundamental for their phenomenology, for their existence, that they could not wait the risk of not touching. And I think I came here to live in Austria and I was like, okay, here everyone was super okay. They do social distancing naturally as well. Privacy here and not touching, not doing it is natural. So they have zero problem. And Italy, on the other hand, things were catching fire. People were really getting depressed. And I think this also has an individual grammar that about this. Right? Okay, well, what is my definition of personal space? What accept that is still my grammar, my individual grammar of personal phenomenology. So does it make sense, or am I pushing it a bit too far? because I'm saying it's all about how much you can relate to this thing. So I understand this meme, or I understand that this is part of the same subject. At one point it changes. Like, okay, at one point, everyone that's in America was an immigrant that came from somewhere else. Now you're Minnesotan, or you're New Yorker, or you're your local city, right? When
Right.
did you decide this? When did you decide that this is your current bubble, right? In some countries, in Europe, some people feel their nationality extends, I don't know, super long. And if you can, I don't know, count your family so far back, you feel like you were a longer being somehow. This is not my case, but you can definitely see this variation. But some people have their identity, they kind of redefine their boundary, and this can change in a couple of generations. Like you have your nuclear family, you don't know your uncle, soon enough it's just you, and you're not even, people who are in your city, they are not even an individual that you can relate and have some trust.
Yeah. I'm sorry that all my responses are structured like Zen koans, but where everything is itself and its opposite. But one of the things that's I think important to consider about something like identity is the fact that something like the dehumanization that occurs with like a game theory model of the world, where everyone's constantly playing the prisoner's dilemma, is that it's a narcissistic response, right? It's this terror that someone will act like you, or in fact, it has an internality like you, which leads to your identification of them as other because they are similar to you. And it's that similarity that enforces that otherness. And so when you're dealing with these spaces of identification as these longer lineages, or even if it's like in a chronologically or temporally, horizontal sense, instead, you're talking about kind of the opposite narcissism, where these other people are similar to you, and thereby you're not led into the conflict of wondering if they are dangerously similar to you. And that's something that's really interesting to me, and that I got kind of stuck on when you were towards the beginning of your last set of comments.
Can you elaborate how you could be dangerously similar, like as a point to steal your own identity? Or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a dangerous similarity is that if I want to steal your wallet, then I know that you might want to steal mine. That everyone has their own intentions and everyone has their own needs and wants. And by my own like abjective need to make sense of my own self by removing other things from myself, I recognize that these walls that I've shored up are defending me from all of the qualities that I have inherent inside of my own psyche. Sorry, I shouldn't say things like that in the Deleuze reading group. I keep saying it too. I'm a very bad boy. But yeah, so I mean, it's again the Zen koan thing, because all I'm saying is that different people are the same and the same people are different. But I think that's where a lot of this like love and distrust both kind of simultaneously occur. And it's just really fascinating to me. And also where a lot of the dankness paradox, it falls into the same kind of identification boundaries.
So, but this that you said about, so think about the golden rule, for instance, do unto others as you wish to do unto yourself, or something like this. But
Yeah.
what if you really if you're a masochist and you really like pain? Should you be inflicting pain into others? If you can recognize that most people don't like pain, are you still, the golden rule applies?
Wait, that problem is, I think Deleuze on his own more than Deleuze with Guattari, but certainly, Deleuze and Guattari as well. But the problem of the masochist is not, and never is the problem of the sadist. Like Deleuze is Deleuze on his own, but D&G in ATP are sort of happy to allow for the becoming powers of the masochist, especially as it deterritorializes the body into disorganization.
Yeah, the BWO is in fact a masochistic process, right?
Yeah, and it has, so it doesn't have to operate in this binary of I require a sadist. Also, to say, because we have the golden rule, or I'm like some kind of like, God, I hope there are these kind of Kantians in some way, but BDSM Kantians so we go we go. Someone own a meme now. But so we'd say in some sense, you know, because I require, you know, in all instances, you know, I would only will that people inflict pain on me. That is the limit of the masochistic experience there. I mean, there is nothing in the golden rule that says because I'm a masochist, I'm required now to also turn to be a sadist and inflict masochism, because I'm in no way understanding that there is a desire in the other, which I think relates to this idea, you know, when Deleuze and Guattari talk about, you know, the fond line is anyone who likes cats or dogs is a fool. You know, the pet requires that you have a narcissistic ideation. It's that, you know, I will now treat this complete other, you know, I should be becoming animal. Instead, I'm forcing a set of rules onto this element of my pack. Now, it's always like you can't form a pack or a pact with something like you. They call it unnatural participation. It requires, you know, the recognition of repetition as always difference. So I think in some sense, like when we say, you know, the golden rule might be just fine as far as the pragmatics goes, but you know, and Deleuze is, you know, clearly a Kantian, as, you know, or like somehow massively influenced by Kant in his epistemology and ontology, and possibly his aesthetics. But this whole golden rule thing is jettisoned, as far as, you know, the categorical imperative is jettisoned here, because it's a matter, like I would say that, you know, as far as a rhizome or a BWO goes, it's a matter of ethics, not morality. We're not talking about laws, we're talking about relationships, and what is powerful and increasing flows and potentials, and this sort of like the Spinozan sense of a striving being, and striving and being, I think, always equals becoming. You know, it makes no sense to try and interpret, or to me, like this is just me and my bad read of everything, to think that the golden, like even if the golden rule is good practical advice, it can't logically extend towards the masochist must become the sadist. They're two different. They're not opposite flows of desire. They're not on points. They're lines, and they can cross. They don't necessarily cross. And so, like, this is something I would say, like, you know, the grammar of the sadist and the masochist aren't essential for one another. They can run parallel. They can run transversely. You know, they could exist in worlds where neither of them ever, where they're opposite, never occurred. Like the problem again.
What happens with the thermodynamics of if you have too many masochists and too little sadists and vice versa? Can you get to a stage where you only have masochists and then no one's desire gets fulfilled? Is this an unhealthy?
Of course. And now, like, I think, like, maybe, I think, can we not all agree what exists is not sane, healthy, or actually friendly to us? Like, this is my Lovecraftian take. Yeah. It doesn't care. Being and becoming do not give a shit about us. And so, yeah, it might not be great.
Julian's got to run, or Beyond Woke. I'm sorry, I doxed him. Bye, sir. It was good having you here. Hopefully we can have more of you tomorrow. Love you. Bye. I would also say that, you know, I think that a world of only masochists is utopian, because everyone is finally in a situation where they can never get what they want. And that's, I think, a perfect masochistic fantasy for everyone. So, in fact, it works perfectly.
I don't know, like the conversation is like what, training yourself to like change what produces like pleasure. Like, I don't know, like the whole thing of like, I don't know, like I thought like he was trying to like have a different conversation about like what sadism and masochism were like, in the Thousand Plateaus, but like also like what's brought up, like there's a like courtly love and tantric sex are like the other like big ones for Deleuze and Guattari. And I don't know if like even the universals really always apply. I mean, like every tactile thing is different, and like shame and like humiliation are different. And like I don't even know, like I don't even feel like sadism and masochism are like consistent categories. And even if you like are like a sadist, like you might just want to fulfill an artist's desire, but like not want to cause them pain. I don't know. I just
Well, I think everyone here, as like at least nominal Deleuze-oriented people, would agree that all of these categorical distinctions are arbitrary and broken and leaky to begin with. So yeah.
It's like, yeah, I don't know.
So I just because like just to link like court, the courtly tantric and to the knowing that things are leaky, which is a very, very fun image. Courtly and tantric love, leaky all the same. We would say in some sense, I think D&G say something like, so they say, they call courtly love feminine because it puts everything on display, yet it's also secretive. So again, like they expressly speak to this sort of this leakiness, like we're not ever defining things. And I think if we contextualize D&G on what they think the feminine is, and I think it can be problematic in modern parlance, and now that we've lost work beyond, we've lost that insight maybe, but we might say they always see the feminine as this like this rupture of what we might call the signifier of the masculine, which they see as this huge problem. And this is to like bring back the texts that were set readings, not that anybody ever does them or has to do them, because we're not fascists, but we would say in some sense, this is the difference between the face in D&G and the phallus in Lacan. The face is signifying many, many, many things. The phallus is a dick, which is a control. Maybe it's, in some sense you have to lose it, but you always buy into. I think I'm losing my train of thought on this. But yeah, so I guess I'm broadly sort of trying to say. No, actually, I've lost that. I've completely lost that. But I've completely lost that one. Sorry, guys. Sorry, all.
Well, it's a good opportunity to see what's going on with Duster.
Fantastic.
I kind of, I think I don't really have much to say. I thought, although I had something a while back, but I think we're maybe moved. I kind of wanted to, although I would like to maybe direct, it seems like, I don't know, we haven't talked much about the body without organs section. I don't know if that's too like, if I probably, the part where it says you never reach the body without organs because you can't reach it, or is it you never reach it, you can't reach it, you are forever attaining it because it is a limit. So the body without organs is itself a limit.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to say you're already on it. So the body with may also be a plateau, which is also a rhizome, which you simultaneously can be on but can't get to.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like, just these are all coming from the book itself. So I'm kind of having a, like with how it relates to, I mean, it's like, it's saying, there's no deterritorialization without reterritorialization on the, like, is the body without organs a plateau? I guess is my question. Like, because I don't know, maybe I need to, it's been several years since I have underlined through this whole thing parts that I noticed the first time I read it, and that I was interested in the, never mind. My thoughts are too fragmented right now to really make sense of anything, but I guess maybe I wanted to kind of bring, like, maybe if the moderators wanted to expound a little bit on the body without organs section in relation to the memeing stuff. I don't know, or if we have time for that, but
just like, I think there's a really interesting question that Dust has brought up about, just to bring it back to the text and to say, you know, is the BWO a plateau? So, you know, early on they're going to say something along the lines of a plateau is always in the middle, like it's not a start or an end, it's always already. And then, so this is a direct quote from my translation, which is the BWO is already underway the moment the body has had enough of organs and wants to slough them off or loses them. So this is like, it sort of sounds like there's something that has to happen first, but the way they construct this, like whether it's a claim, I think not an argument, but the way they construct it, I think in some sense is to say it's already happening, it's already in motion. So it is a plateau, it's in the middle. Like, and now what the middle is like, this is, you know, I think there's a reason that we've got these 3 chapters or plateaus from the text, because they really, like, they form this rhizome, which is, you know, there's not these points, there are these, the line between the chapter on the rhizome and the BWO cross here. We say, you know, the rhizome rejects its own origin. The moment the rhizome is in motion, which is already, it no longer has its originary, like, taproot, etc. Like it's connecting with everything at every possible point that it can. And so to say that the BWO is already underway is to say that at every moment that it can, it was already, you know, rejecting organs. And so as far as memes go, this sort of links, I think this links back to my hopes for what memes could do as far as they relate to grammar. Memes are always already pressing up against the limits of their own grammar the moment they come into motion. And because we never encounter them at their origin, and hopefully we reject origins in some sense, or abjure them in our arcane circles, our apotropaic wardings. Sorry, had to get a little D&D for a second. But then we would go, yeah, we encounter them like this. And so of course that's the plateau. And because it's a middle, we don't, like, we have no time for hierarchies here. And and then again, but then straight away we hit the limit of the grammar of the day, or the grammar that we strive towards, because we're straight away drawn back in, you know, to the middle of our own prosaic capacity to meme. But I think that the possibility to meme is always, you know, it's not always, I don't think it's like libidinally, you know, and willfully the hype to get, you know, to get beyond. But there's always the potential of that, I think, inside of the meme. You go, here is the hot new take, which will break something. Like, I don't think everyone does that, and I don't even think I do it consciously. But I think that there is something, like, you know, that rejects the structure of language here in some sense, where you go, especially when we move into sort of absurdisms, which largely don't get traction unless you already have a ton of sort of effective clout going on, which straight away gets captioned. But yeah, I do think that the short answer is absolutely, the BWO is a plateau, and the meme is like, I want to say in some sense the meme is the paranoid body, which is, this is a horrible thing to say, because in the paranoid body, the organs are continually under attack by outside forces, but also restored by outside energies. And this just strikes me as, we could just say the meme is continually under attack and fed by. And so, you know, this is why, like, maybe the War Machine chapter would have been really cool to bring in, but like every few sentences, like, we can talk about for hours, but that seems to be, it's under attack and fed by. So this is the meme. The meme is a plateau. A plateau is a body without organs, which also is a plane of consistency. But not every, like, so I think we understand, you know, a plane of consistency is not what could possibly happen, which is always an appeal to priors, but what potentially could happen, which is an appeal to new becomings. And so we would say in some sense that this kind of becoming is always going to be, like, you know, working at not what could happen, but on the question of, and I think this is in like whatever the chapter where it's like on novellas, is the question isn't what happened, it's is something about to happen, and that's the meme. Sorry, I don't know if I feel like I got a bit rambly at the end there, but yeah. Oh, at the beginning too.
No, thanks. That was awesome. Yeah, I like the in some I'm getting the sense like that the self contradictions throughout are like towards the end. I mean, and this is obvious, I guess, probably to people who have, you know, like more studied Deleuze and stuff, but it seems like like Baudrillard was like one of the first ones I got into a few years ago in terms of like hyperreal philosophy and stuff. And it seems like the difference between D&G and like Deleuze is like between Baudrillard and D&G is like Baudrillard seems to be always trying to end the conversation once and for all, where like Baudrillard or where D&G are like trying to permanently prevent the end of conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of understanding them for sure. Something I wanted to, a couple little things that I wanted to point out that don't answer any questions probably, but do maybe help contextualize some understandings of a lot of these extremely abstract and difficult concepts in D&G would be that there's we're thinking about something like the body without organs and the way that you can be on it and not be it and be constantly becoming it, but then, you know, the being re-territorialized as soon as you deterritorialize, and all of these bizarre paradoxes and motions is this idea of the abstract machine. And the abstract machine is really curious because, and maybe Luke can phrase this in a better way than I can, but I will attempt, but it's, an abstract machine is not the actions of the parts, nor is it the parts, but it's kind of the motion that all of the parts of this plane of consistency end up making through the space. And it's that kind of culmination of the movements, potential and actual, that produce a larger machine. Luke, is that making sense? Am I just farting out of my face right now?
So I was trying to work out a concise way to talk about abstract machines like minutes before this all started, because it's so rough.
Yeah.
But I think so. What you've said there, like to talk about, you know, not the parts, you know, and to talk about motion. I think this is important because when we want to talk about the abstract with Deleuze, and I might be like linking more to difference and repetition than anything he's done with Guattari, but I might say, you know, the abstract is in some sense going to be related to the virtual. So the abstract is going to be the real, yet not actual. And so when we talk about the abstract machine, and like, please, like someone shoot this down, because this is, you know, I've got a berserk and willful misunderstanding of these texts. But I would say,
I think it's like the part that like is the argument against Marx and with his metaphysics, because it's it has content, it has expression, but it has substance but doesn't have matter. So like there'd be like an Einstein machine. There's no matter to it, but it has substance, it has content, it has expression, but like there's no matter to it. It's like the part of the metaphysics that is the not like why it's realism and not materialism. So it's that like
yes.
other quadrant, and it's like when Helmsleb is applied to metaphysics, I feel like Levi Bryant, I feel like was kind of wrote like big on this, of like kind of laying out the causality, but it's also like the way that like virtual relates to, or what, the real is the actual and the virtual, but the virtual is reality, but it's like it's the folded in reality. It's like the I don't know, like past that it would be like, oh, here's Leibniz, and like Leibniz fractals, and the virtual and the actual relates is like different, like I don't know, like the fractal topology versus like the extra dimension when it breaks down to like from 3 to 2, would be like the virtual actual relationship would be like the topology versus like the 3R embedded space.
I found a better
Sorry.
a better comparison actually than the abstract machine. But if you, but Luke,
sorry,
Luke, yeah.
sorry, I really liked that. You know, to bring it to topology, I think is like it's something that I feel like I don't quite get. Like, I mean, I'm not like you know, equipped theoretically to deal with it, but my intuitions are that like the talking about it in terms of topology are in some sense like is where this needs to end up. It's just like the sort of the more mathematical sort of lines of D&G thought, and where I start to sort of like fade out a bit. And I intuit it by, yeah, so like that made a bunch of like made a bunch of hope for me, if not sense. So that's something I can move towards
It's
and think
virtually
of.
useful, not actually.
Yeah, that also Deleuze, you mentioned Deleuze earlier, and he's the one that kind of takes the geological metaphor to new heights, I believe, or the topological. In the 1,000 Years of Nonlinear History, like Manuel Deleuze is really Deleuzian in the sense that he kind of takes these concepts to different topologies, I think. But it's been several years since I read either of these books.
Deleuze has an essay that I can't really wrap my head around that's like Deleuze, mathematics, and realist ontology. But I feel like is like a 30-page attempt to like lay this stuff out. But like I know like his video, I don't know. He has like the videos series on the stuff. The metaphysics is ontology is like the closest I can think of like to try to go off of. I don't know.
I have to just shut out. I agree. Everything boils down to topology in the end, and this relates to what I talk about mnemonics also, because you're creating a mnemonic in a topological space is a sort of a hub, is a sort of a high connectivity part, is somewhere where you have a lot of access to other boundaries. It bounds a lot of stuff. So in the end, it kind of boils. And the rhizome is topology. When you talk about the rhizome is an abstract topology. 100%. There's nothing else to it than connectivity and topology.
Dorian, can you link you said you had a more like salient or relevant like example of an abstract machine. Does that in any way relate to these last sort of two comments from?
Not deeply, and I don't know if it's necessarily more salient because it's from Whitehead. So I mean, it's just more of a mess. But
so yeah, so sorry. So something that's just like this just struck me, and this is like maybe not for here, like because now I feel like we're getting into, and of course we've diverged all over the place because we're talking D&G, but. So this Deleuze is a realist, not a materialist. Deleuze isn't a materialist,
right?
Is this
a pure metaphysician, right?
Which strikes. I thought his metaphysics were material.
Oh God!
Which is where I thought
the machines are all actually machines.
Yeah, and so I thought the virtual, like. You know, nothing. It would be like, you know, saying this. I gotta lean back on my favorite way to shit on Graham Harman. It would be like saying that you know, that Cthulhu isn't just electrons. Of course, that's what it is. So yeah, so like, and yeah, so it strikes me like maybe this is a conversation for another time, but like because I've read Jameson calling Deleuze a dualist, but it seems to be a dualism of materialism. So yeah, maybe this isn't for this conversation, but it's a really provocative and sore point for me because I'm like I need to cling to my materialism and also love Deleuze.
There's that book that he wrote, or that's Gilbert Simon Blanc, I think, State and Politics, with it that deals with his interventions with Marx. I haven't personally read it, but I know that my friend recommended it. I've been trying to get to it, but that might have more.
I think Deleuze is coming from a tradition with Bergson that is too much emphasis on creative will and determining reality to just be reduced to materialism. That I think is just a reaction to Hegel and only really applies to like German philosophy, and that like materialism is an oversimplification. I don't think it's not like it's beyond the dichotomy of idealism and materialism that I think that like Marxists and Hegelians think in terms of. Like I don't know, will and representation, the two things.
I would also say, and you know, this is coming from my bias as something of a determinist, but that the virtual is by nature of being virtual made material at some point, right? In at least in some sense, and it just based on this. I keep coming back to the idea of actual entities in Whitehead, and so just this idea of the I just the violent head movements from Kami. I wasn't sure if it was something I said, but the actual entities, it's essentially the idea of all of these potential points and moments in a process and virtualities of the process as all component of as all of these being components of the actual entity, and the actual entity is all of these interconnected quantities and moments and you know just everything's of that object, which we would otherwise just view as like, well, I'm Dorian right now, but then Dorian in the future is a different Dorian. But all of these things are ultimately connected, and so all of these material and virtual quantities are part of a singular object for Whitehead, and all of these objects are then interrelated within other actual entities and objects. And so it's metaphysical epigenetics is a that's fun. But so that makes it so that for me, especially if I think of the world as being that everything that is and everything that will be is, that the virtual material in some ways become absolutely not indistinct, but so tightly bound up together that it's difficult to say that they it's not dualistic, right? This isn't a binary of virtual versus actual or material versus virtual or anything like that. They're all part of the same goop together. So it's
But it comes into a topology that stands in time, right? That's what you're saying. Like if it already exists in the future, it's just a topology that has a time or more time dimensions.
Yeah.
And it's just far from you in this axis.
Yeah, exactly.
So how would this link to sort of like, I think Deleuze is maybe sort of Bergsonianism, which is you know, other than his work on cinema is the stuff I'm least competent in. But I might say, you know, aren't we talking about, you know, the difference between time as extension and time as duration? So we might, in some sense, like, yeah. So it makes no sense to speak of time as extension at all here, and which I think is also, you know, I'm trying to condense Deleuze's Spinoza into Deleuze's Bergson, and say and say that, you know, Bergson and Spinoza maybe as far as time goes are quite different because. You know, if I'm probably so bad at reading Spinoza, I would say Spinoza would say, you know, what we have is the expression of what there is, which is just what there is. And Bergson might say what we have is time as duration as experienced, and which is in some sense, but somehow like non-phenomenological, like, or not appealing to what we might, you know, think is existential phenomenology. So yeah, it's very difficult for me to get my head around how the virtual would relate to, like, 'cause I would see, my take on Deleuze would be that it's more related to the Spinozan. What there is, it's not going to extend over time. It's going to be just this, not necessarily ossified, but a determined. I hate this. It sounds anti-Deleuzean, but maybe you're in the same boat as me, Dorian, because of your determinism. But it's like there's a structure of potential, not possibility, but it's just what there is.
Yeah.
And it's not going to, like, time isn't going to change it. It would require in some sense a new expression to change it. But it's all happening. It's all happening. And
Right.
between strata, which is, I think, more spatial, which brings us right back again to where we started when I tried to link, like, replace the word map with meme. So we're not tracing what there is. And I think that time as a cartography asks us to trace it, whereas space as a cartography, we get much more play inside of, which I feel like here I'm not being as hard a determinist as Dorian, but it strikes me that time doesn't change things. Expression and material change things. Like, we don't wait for stuff to happen. Things change because material changes, and time isn't. Of course, like, time is a given for changing material. Like, I'm not going to fucking fight against physics. But yeah, so I'm stumbling towards, like, I know we're running out of time, stumbling towards this idea, like, how we talk about time as far as Deleuze goes as well. Which also we could do, this could spring for tomorrow. What does time mean for memes, and how they change? Do they change over time, or do they change as intensities and conditions change? Like, I've stopped using Facebook because of this, but an algorithm is a thing in the world, being, it's real, it doesn't exist, it's not an abstract immaterial force. And I don't, I'm never going to use Facebook again because of this. Like, how do memes change according to, say, algorithms? Does it change what we do? Like, do our powers and affects change? Like, I'm really just trying to wrap this up because I know we've got really little time left, and I feel like we've really briefly scraped to the surface, while also, delved into greater depths than I ever expected as well. So this has been really brilliant. Brilliant, and also endarkening as well, without appealing to the darker light of it. Whenever memes names have been spoken in anything but jest, it has brought up the question: what if memes were only developed to increase our knowing?
Exactly. Deepening unknowing. Yeah. This is fantastic. Sorry, Luke.
Oh, no. That's I feel like that's my closing line. Now it's been ruined. I'm sorry.
I helped you ruin it. It's okay. But yeah, probably picking up on time in the future. Yeah. Tomorrow, talking about that would be great.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to our three panelists, Beyond Work, Deleuze and Dragons, and Dank Deleuze. Thank you so much to everybody for your participation and your questions and the discussion. You can continue to add to the meme board. We can go over tomorrow if there's time and interest. And we'll see you tomorrow at the same time, same place. Thank you.